The revenge plan of a betrayed husband. From heartache to final divorce. My lying wife attacked me in the back, and my mother supported her. Years later, I made them regret it all. Recently, I caught my former alcoholic wife relapsing into drinking, and while she was sleeping, I came across a text discussion between her and a good friend of mine. I discovered out she was having an affair, and while I didn't want to accept it at first, it became clear to me what was occurring. I left my house with the goal to end my life. Fortunately, I was able to get myself together and spent the entire night outside. Then came the next morning, and my wife began hammering my phone all morning. I was receiving numerous texts and phone calls from her, asking where I was and what the hell was going on, as my work van was still sitting in the driveway and I was nowhere to be seen. I wrote her back, explaining that there was an engine problem and that I'd gotten a lift into work, which she appeared to accept as she just responded back, "Okay." I went to a friend's house and spent the day with him. He persuaded me to keep a low profile and see what I could find, while simultaneously consulting with a lawyer to determine my alternatives. He took me home around 6 p.m., and I was really exhausted. I believe that having adrenaline rushing throughout the day and then abruptly stopping knocks it right out of you. So I was exhausted when I arrived home. I knew something was up the moment I got through the door because my wife immediately started asking me questions about work. I questioned why she cared. She claimed that I had left my large flask and lunch bag in the front passenger seat and that something had happened today. She could feel it. I was going to reveal everything, but I was simply too sleepy. I couldn't be bothered putting on a pretense. I just said, "Yeah, there is something up." When I was putting her alcoholic buttocks to bed last night, a message appeared on her iWatch, which I read along with the others, stating that she was a vile cheater with whom I wanted nothing to do. Within just a second, her demeanor changed from that of a powerful person with arms crossed to that of a terrified little girl. She began sobbing, and I simply walked away and went upstairs to the shower. When I went out, she was still crying on the top stair, and the excuses began very immediately. She was inebriated, fragile, had never done anything like that before, and he had messaged her first, which meant nothing. She would never go through with it. She would say pretty much everything everyone on here said, as if she knew exactly what she was saying. The only thing she didn't do was attempt to blame me. She was probably aware that if she had attempted it, I would have thrown her out. I informed her that I wanted a divorce and her out of the house within a month. I also informed her that she was moving into the spare room. I've been ignoring her ever then, scowling at her and shaking my head whenever she starts talking rubbish. I do not want to hear that. I was telling my parents what was going on, and then something unexpected happened. My mother sided with her and insisted on not tossing her out on the streets. My mother was saying she made a mistake and that we should deal with it like adults, that we'd been through too much together, and that she didn't do anything. It was all words. She absolutely chose her side over mine. I could not believe it. I managed to schedule an appointment with a divorce lawyer for next week, so I'll be there to discuss my alternatives. Update. It's been 20 days since I discovered my wife was cheating on me with a friend, and the situation has grown horrible. I offered her a month to move out, and she's been sleeping in the spare room, but it's evident she has no intention of leaving. She has nowhere to go now that she has spoken to my mother. In any case, that is not my concern. I've seen my divorce lawyer several times, and I'm currently in the process of drafting a divorce petition and having my wife serve divorce papers. I've also opened my own bank account and deducted 50% of the balance from our combined account. The vibe around the house has been strange, to say the least. The living room has become a no man's land where no one goes because we both spend the majority of our time in our rooms. I had been absolutely ignoring her, but after reading about the 180, I began following it and was cordial, although a little frigid to her. I'm so pleased I did this. I was starting to feel like a monster. Refusing to acknowledge her presence was not the correct thing to do, and I ended up feeling like I had wronged her rather than the other way around. The only time I deviated from the 180 was when I stepped into the bathroom last week and saw her crying on the floor by the bathtub. I helped her up and immediately hugged her, though it was more of a there hug than one full of love. The terrible part is that I'm so suspicious of her now that I wouldn't be surprised if she was waiting for me to arrive so she could put on a performance. The thing is, that's probably not true, but this is what's going through my mind. In this environment, it's simply harmful. She's been boasting about how she'll do anything to save this marriage, anything to demonstrate to me that it was merely a dumb error. So I mentioned a lie detector test. I have no intention of ever finishing one. I wouldn't know where to start. I simply wanted to measure her reaction. She was all for it, at least until a few hours later, when she returned to me with a tablet in hand, complaining about how inaccurate they are and how anxiety and stress may produce false results. I just chuckled. It's also worth noting that the friend she cheated with is no longer conversing with any of our mutuals. I exposed him on social media a few days ago, and I've been swamped with texts from both our friends and him. They've all turned their backs on him, which is extremely encouraging to witness. Anyway, I've spoken with my mother about this several times. During a violent dispute, I asked her why she was supporting my wife. Was there something she wasn't telling me here? What did she expect? She stated that she has always viewed my wife as the daughter she never had but always desired. Therefore she has been drawn to her since we met. As I already stated, they share a deep bond. My wife has no relatives and only a few friends with their own busy lives and families, so if I threw her out, she would be completely alone. She tried to persuade me to reach a compromise, saying that we might revisit it in 3 or 4 months to assess where we were mentally, and she urged me to try couples counseling before giving up. I am not doing that. I feel ill just thinking about being in the same house as my wife. If worst comes to worst, I'm prepared to walk out the door and never return. Fuck this house. I must be able to see myself in the mirror with some sense of self-esteem. Someone needs to maintain their word in in this mess. If I do decide to go, my best friend has offered to let me stay with him for a few weeks until I sort myself out. If I walk out that door, I'll be done with my mother. I will never speak with her again in my life. She'll probably interpret that as my giving up on her, leaving away without at least attempting to fix things first. She'll interpret it as her choosing someone who has broken my heart above me. Update 2. As of this morning, I no longer call that house home. I saw on the calendar that my wife had a hospital appointment with her ophthalmologist, so knowing she would be gone for a few hours, I seized the opportunity to get my belongings and move out, which I did. After getting my belongings transferred and organized, I simply placed the house keys on the kitchen table, along with the divorce papers I obtained from the lawyer last week, and was on my way. I blocked both my wife's and mother's phone numbers, and all future communication with my wife will be handled through my lawyer. In terms of living arrangements, I'm staying with a friend for a week or two, but I'm hoping to be in my own rented space by Christmas. I haven't spoken with my mother in several weeks. The last time we spoke was via text, and I tried to tell my mother exactly what my wife was saying in her texts, particularly the "I can keep a secret" one. That really hurt. I explained why it hurt so much and why I didn't believe it was her first time doing it, thus I could never trust her again. My mother replied back, stating she couldn't speak to me while I was like this and that she would let me cool down. She tried to call me a few days ago, but I just ignored her call. As I mentioned earlier, I banned her phone number as of today. I feel so let down by my mother, and it nearly feels worse than my wife's original betrayal. I doubt I'll ever speak to her again, given how I'm feeling right now. Day 3. It had been more than 7 months since my wife first cheated on me, and I honestly assumed that was the end of it. But I received a phone call that dragged me back into the mire. I moved 15 miles away, changed my phone number, and am still in the process of divorcing my wife. She has entirely ignored all of my divorce lawyer's requests for cooperation, which has hampered proceedings. We are currently in the process of filing an application for considered service and attempting to have her served properly by the courts. If she continues to ignore me, I can go ahead with the divorce without her involvement. While at work, I received a phone call from my best buddy, who informed me that my father was attempting to contact me because my mother was ill, and that it would be acceptable if he gave him my phone number. I responded sure. Then my father called to inform me mom was in the hospital. She's stable but not amazing. Obviously, I was astonished because I hadn't heard my father's voice in a long time. It was also the most emotional I'd ever heard him. He told me that my mother really wants to see me, so would I meet him at the hospital and accompany him to see her? I replied all right and planned to meet him outside the hospital. When the time came to leave my house and go see her, I was tempted to back out at the last minute, but I felt I wanted some closure and knew I wouldn't forgive myself if I didn't go and something occurred. When I pulled into the hospital parking lot, I got a strange feeling of paranoia and half expected my wife to emerge from behind a shrub or something. I met my father at the entryway, and it was unpleasant since he tried to hug me, but I declined. I then stated that if my wife was present in any way, shape or form, I was about to turn and walk out. He assured me she wasn't, and we headed to the ward where mom was. When I saw my mother, I had the scare of my life because she looked like she had been in the wars. I have never seen her look so frail. She has a severe black eye, as well as extensive bruising and purple yellowness down one side of her face. She suffered a catastrophic fall, breaking 2 ribs, shattering her elbow and banging one side of her head and face against the ground. She appeared zombified, but perked up when she spotted me. She told me how much she missed me and that she didn't think she'd ever see me again. I informed her that if she genuinely wanted to contact me, she could have done so. We talked for a while about what had happened, how she had been down for a few hours before my father discovered her, and how she was desperate to get back to normal and rebuild her relationship with me. She brought up my wife and how I had been pressing for a divorce, but she was either ignoring or not receiving the letters. So I asked whether she was still in the house. Mom admitted it, and Dad began to look uncomfortable. I just looked away, disgusted. Mom began to express how lost my wife is without me and how she is not doing well. I knew then that nothing would change. She hasn't had an epiphany or seen things from a different perspective. She simply wants the status quo restored. She insisted the house was and always would be my home, but I told her I didn't want it. It no longer means anything to me and only brings back horrible memories. I stayed for less than an hour in all. When I left, I indicated that if I wanted to contact you, I would, but don't wait on the phone for me to call since you might have to wait a while. When Dad escorted me out, he asked if I'd keep in touch with him, and I answered yes. I'm not sure whether that's right or wrong. Time will tell. When I got home, my feelings ranged from grief to fury, but I'm glad I went. I couldn't help but think of my wife and how much she meant to me. It will never not hurt. Update 4. I'm getting close to finalizing my divorce from my wife. She has signed the divorce papers and mailed them to my divorce lawyer, so all that remains are the legalities. She wrote me a message through my father in which she apologized for not allowing me to go on, that she thought she could save things, but now realizes she can't, and that she needs to move on for her own well-being. I appreciate her for seeing things clearly. She doesn't want anything from the divorce and has stated that she will leave the house as soon as she can get on her feet, which I am fine with. I haven't spoken to my mother yet, but my father says she's doing much better now that she's out of the hospital and back to normal. I'm not sure how things will work out with them, but I've told them that if the house is going to be mine, they should put it in my name right away to offer me some security. Then we can try to build bridges. We'll see how it goes. I began treatment and spoke with a psychiatrist both over the phone and in person, and it has been quite beneficial for me to speak frankly about everything for a short period of time. My doctor also stated something to me that truly hit home. When I complained about how my greatest years were behind me, she replied. Your best years are the ones you have left. I believe she meant that the past is no longer real. It just exists in your head. But the present moment exists, and you may choose to make the most of it or dwell in a past that no one else can see. It's a phrase I'll try to remember whenever I'm feeling low. Update 5. First and foremost, I am now officially divorced. It seems like a weight has been lifted, but it also marks the end of roughly 1/3 of my life. I saw my ex-wife for the first time in over a year while I was walking into a shop in the town center around a month ago after visiting a friend. She opened the door to leave just as I walked in. We established eye contact. She whispered something I couldn't understand, and we simply gazed at each other for a few seconds. Then I went inside. As I walked throughout the shop, a sense of profound despair overcame me. I had to take a minute to collect myself. It just goes to show how one look can send you back to square one. Do I miss her? No. I miss the person I thought she was, but she no longer exists, if ever did. I do not wish her any harm or sorrow. I honestly don't. I simply refuse to move forward with hatred in my heart. The only person it will affect in the long run is me. I also learned from my friend's girlfriend that she was certain she spotted my ex-wife outside a city pub, all over another guy, a few years ago when we were still together. Apparently, she never said anything to me since she wasn't sure it was her and didn't want to become involved. Another key point is that I'm dealing with my parents and have nothing but apathy for them. I'm just having trouble feeling anything, and no matter what I do, I don't think that will change. My father has attempted to rekindle the relationship, but I am no longer interested. That may sound harsh, but it's the truth. The most important thing that happened was that I nearly died. So at the beginning of the year, I had a terrifying event when I sliced the back of my pant leg on a metal dumpster while brushing against it at work. I had no idea it had created a cut until I got home, and when I went to bed at night, I felt uncomfortable. I awoke about 2 a.m. with my calf pulsing. I felt quite ill, saw double, was disoriented, and alternated between a strong fever and chills. I knew immediately away it could be sepsis, so I called an ambulance. While hyperventilating, my thoughts raced around my head at breakneck speed. Do you know what was the single thing that kept me calm when I was freaking out? I accepted the possibility of death, and for some reason, I stopped being terrified. I'm not sure if it was the entire embracing fate mindset, but when I accepted that it might be over, it removed all the complexities out of the equation and made everything much more easy and serene. I've been thinking about it a lot lately, and when I think of infidelity or betrayal, I get very similar feelings. You must acknowledge that what you once had has passed. It is long gone. If someone is prepared to plunder such depths and brutally stab you in the back for their own enjoyment, fighting an unwinnable struggle is admirable, but when you're urinating into the wind with lottery odds of victory, is it worthwhile? Is it worth the pain? I do not think so. Only after we have lost everything are we free to accomplish anything. Tyler Durden.